Earlier last year, I made a video called Own Nothing and Be Happy. And that video was basically about how people are losing the power to own the things that they pay for, whether it be through digital means. And in this case, what I'm about to talk about today is practically you don't even own the things that you physically own anymore. So it's almost like you're not safe on any front. A lot of the products that we buy sort of have sort of like a proprietary monopoly on themselves. Um, there are plenty of companies that I could name that don't allow you to work on your product. You can't take your product anywhere else other than the source to get it fixed and serviced. Should it break, you can't replace it by going anywhere other than the source. And while I do understand that, I understand wanting to build your brand to be all self contained so that you can sort of create a standard for your product. It also stifles the buying power, the lasting power, and the choosing power of its customers. In the days even when I was growing up, I remember um, products being built much more, let's just say, sturdy. I remember kitchen appliances, stoves, microwaves, even toaster ovens, all of those sorts of things. The way that they were made, they were very heavy duty. The raw materials that were used to build these things, very heavy, very costly. Your grandmother would have an oven or a refrigerator in her kitchen that she had had for 50 years, and it was like pure steel. Um, the cars that I remember being driven around in when I was a 2 or 3, 4 year old boy, they were called clunkers affectionately. Those vehicles were very heavy duty, very loud, but to me, it seemed as if they lasted a lot longer, as opposed to now. Most cars are made out of plastic. Um, you know, it's like you might as well make these vehicles out of fiberglass. I mean, that's what a lot of them are made out of. Um, and it's changed I don't know, the overall feel of the vehicles. One could get into the argument about why that's done. It could be a gas mileage thing. It could be a weight thing. It could be a materials thing. Maybe after a few wars, the U.S. couldn't afford to use so many heavy metals. So they transitioned to more, you know, applicable materials that were easier to make, easier to contain, to obtain, I'm sorry, but not so easy to maintain. Your car get into a fender bender in 1985 and both cars are fine. Today, you get into a fender bender and you got to pay 800 to get your fender replaced because it's made out of plastic and it shatters into little bitty pieces every time that you touch anything. You have car brands like Rolls Royce, Bentley, Benz, where you can't service those cars on your own. If you have those cars, you almost have to take them somewhere to be serviced. There's no climbing under the hood, opening up your oil reservoir and changing the oil yourself. They even go as far as to make the screws that they use to tighten certain things down or whatever totally proprietary. They aren't universal. Some cars, like I believe Teslas, if you work on a Tesla, it will notify Tesla or something like that. I'm not totally sure on that, so don't sue me. But you get the gist. A lot of proprietary products that are being sold that you can't really work on because the tools that we all know and love and have don't work on those products. The history of things lasting longer and all of the conspiracies that come behind that. It's a very rich topic. It's a very overly represented topic. I remember being younger and reading about Tom Ogle. This is Tom Ogle here. I'll read a little bit of this. It says technology used in automobile has advanced tremendously over the century, allowing vehicles not only to provide a comfortable and relaxing drive, blah, blah, blah. About 4 years ago, an El Pasoan developed an astounding system for fuel efficiency to be used in any automobile. Even though Tom Ogle was not the first to think of this basic idea, his device did have unique differences that simplified his invention. Tom Ogle created a vaporized fuel system which allowed a car to travel 200 miles on 2 gallons of gas. Now, just to put this into perspective, I just drove to Atlanta and I drove a little small, tiny vehicle, which was a Kia Forte. It was very tiny vehicle. I was probably getting about, I don't know, 35 miles to the gallon, right? Now, this car here that he invented is said to have been able to travel, well, it's not the car that he invented, it's the carburetor that goes into any car, that could go into any car, that vaporizes the fuel to make it more efficient, which would allow you to travel 100 miles per gallon. Now, I remember buying my car back then. The electric car had kind of been brand new, just 2013, and fuel efficiency was sort of a hot topic because it was like the green initiative. We were talking about how could we get more, basically output from our energy sources so that it would be less waste, less fuel emissions, all of those sorts of things. Um, and I remember when cars started to touch the 30 miles per gallon, benchmark. And everybody was like, ooh, wow, that's amazing. That's really good. As opposed to cars in the 90s, clunkers that weigh like 5,000 pounds on average, you're getting like 12 miles to the gallon. But as I got older and I started swimming in these uh, conspiracy trenches, I read a lot about this sort of thing. People making vehicles that ran on vegetable oil, or people making cars that ran on water, H2O. Then the whole E89 thing happened where you had the biofuel, and then, of course, electric vehicles. I started reading that 100 years ago, 120, 30 years ago, they had already invented ways for the car. First of all, an electric car existed 100 years ago. It was buried and done away with. But fuel efficiency, the means to make it much more efficient, existed long before you and I walked this planet. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why do these things get buried or they don't become mainstream until they're profitable? I also remember during that green initiative sort of like jumping off point where we started talking about how we're all being so wasteful with water and all those sorts of things, and even that there was a fuel shortage. You know, say what you want to say, but that's the theory behind the starting of the 2 wars that we fought in the Middle East was about acquiring oil from Saudi and that entire region. So if there's a fuel problem, like we have a shortage, why wouldn't you also want as much efficiency as possible? Could it be that because if 1 gallon could take you 100 miles versus 20, it would make the price of oil plummet drastically? Could that be the reason? The more I look into more things as I get older and live this life, the more that I understand that capitalism is the culprit behind a lot of things. You have brands like Rolex, um, again, Tesla, and even Apple, where they don't want you to work on their products. It's not just cars. Rolex made it so that if you work on a watch If you get a watch worked on via a third party watchmaker or watch repairer that is not authorized by Rolex or isn't Rolex, then your watch will be one, severely devalued, and two, almost disowned by the company, and they will refuse service to it in some cases where they won't even accept it after the fact because the parts have been swapped out and all of that. Now, with something like a watch, I can understand it a bit better. It's a watch, it's built by Rolex. They almost have hidden technologies or whatever, the way that they make their perpetual motion. Each watchmaker has their own unique way of building their parts to get the watch to work. You know what I mean? And Rolex isn't any different. Rolex is one of the originators of proprietary perpetual motion systems in their watches, right? Now, a watch isn't something that necessarily makes the world go round, you know, as opposed to a car that literally allowed us to leap forward as a race of people, right? But cars, the development of cars have almost been bottlenecked. And when you look further into that concept, things being stifled on purpose, you get into a deep bag of conspiracies that go as far back as the Dark Ages with Christianity or as far back as Rome and Julius Caesar. You know what I mean? Things being bottlenecked so that they only develop at the speed that an oligarch could benefit from. Apple. I'm right now currently recording on a laptop that I was not doing my videos on prior. This laptop is great. I just got it. It's brand new. I've only had it for, I don't know, 8 months or something like that, right? But before that, I had an Apple, my iMac, sitting where this laptop is currently sitting. The iMac died on me back in December. I kept rolling. I said, you know, whenever I get the money, I'll take it to the Apple store, get it looked at, because that's the only place that Apple will essentially allow you to take it. Now, you can find third-party Apple repairs to fix your Apple products for you, but typically they frown upon that, and it's much harder to find people that work on Apple products because Apple themselves have that market sold up so well. So I took it. I got my money up a little bit this month. I said, you know, let me drive it up here to the Somerset Mall, take it to the Apple store and see what they tell me. I go in hoping it's a simple fix, like maybe they'll just reset the OS or do something simple for me and get it back running. They tried all that. Nothing worked, of course. They take it back and say, oh, yeah, we can run it through our system and see if we can reset it. Came back 5 minutes later. That almost seemed like comically short, like they didn't even have enough time to actually run the test that they mentioned. And they come back and said, yeah, it didn't work, but check this out. We got a pricing for you already prepared. It's going to be $400 for the part, $100 for the labor, and another X amount of dollars for fees and taxes. And you will be walking out the door at $599.98 or some shit like that. Almost like a prepared sales pitch, it almost seemed like. And this is not my first go around with Apple. I have an iPhone in my hand, as you can hear. I had an Apple laptop that died on me several times in the few years that I owned it. Every time I went up there, they said, oh, yeah, you can get one of our hard drives or you could do this. And then they almost make it to where you can't open it yourself, as opposed to this Windows laptop that I'm working on. I already have done work like that. I know how to open my laptop, swap out the hard drive, or add an NVMe drive, change the the RAM sticks or whatever it is that I need. I have it in my studio where I record for a living. I had a custom built Windows PC. I know the ins and outs of it, the fans, the power supply, the hard drives, the RAM, the motherboard, the IO, all of it. And I can change and swap anything out that I want. Windows in the computer space, Linux, even more so Linux, are sort of like supporters of DIY. Companies like that allow you to work on the products that you purchase from them and build your own custom products even through them or through any third-party source that allows you to. Windows obviously being the most popular. Check this video out.
I wanted to have you on a podcast, and Apple asked us not to do it, to have you. They literally said, please don't talk to her. Having nothing to do with what you do for a living. I think they just... I didn't think they cared for you, is what happened. They wouldn't let us do even that dumb thing we just did in the first act on AI. Like, what is that sensitivity? Why are they so afraid to even have these conversations out in the public sphere?
I think it just shows one of the dangers of what happens when you concentrate so much power and so much decision making in a small number of companies. I mean, going back all the way to the founding, there was a recognition that in the same way that you need the Constitution to create checks and balances in our political sphere,
right,
you also needed the antitrust and anti-monopoly laws to safeguard against concentration of economic power, because you don't want an autocrat of trade in the same way that you don't want a monarch.
But then it took them, I mean, it wasn't until the Sherman Act in what, 1890 something?
Yep. On top of making their products difficult, Apple even slows down their iPhones on purpose. I remember reading a couple years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, about a lawsuit, maybe class action. I don't think it was anything criminal, but it was a class action lawsuit. I think there's been several class action lawsuits accusing Apple of using their iOS updates or whatever to slow down and almost make obsolete their older models to force you into buying a new phone. And that's skeevy. If you buy something and it works great, and especially if you pay a pretty penny for it, it should work as long as it works. You shouldn't be forced down a hallway of choices. If it works, it works. I remember when iPhones were sort of new, people would be talking about this, whether it be Twitter or even in person. I've heard people saying like, my phone is tripping and the new one is about to come out. It almost seemed intentional. Turns out it actually is. It's not just a conspiracy. They literally will destroy your phone from the inside out to force you into the Apple Store to spend another $1,200, $1,000, or whatever the phone you want costs. That's not fair. They're not playing fair. In terms of cars, I went and looked up companies that support their customers working on their cars and them not necessarily having an issue with that. I saw that Toyota, Honda, Mazda, Subaru, and even Chevy all support DIY. Now, I've never owned a Chevy. I don't know what those cars are like, the modern ones, but I do know historically, everybody in the hood working on their box Chevys. And, car culture in general, back then, you could go to Murray's or whatever, get you a car part, you could swap it out yourself. Now, when you open the hood of a car, it's all safeguarded. It's all buttoned up and pretty. It's got all these plastic runners and all that sort of thing that stops you from getting to it. Try to change your headlight, it takes forever. You have to go through all of these difficult ways because they're trying to discourage you so that you can get frustrated, take this car to the dealership or to the manufacturer, get it replaced at heightened prices. Another example of an old product lasting forever is this light bulb that you have here in front of you. This is a light bulb that they call the Centennial Light or the Eternal Light, the Eternal Bulb that was lit in 1901 with its some sort of filament that it has that is made of, I believe, carbon or something like that. and the light has been lit for 123 years. The sort of the coincidence in me finding this, because I had never heard of this until like 3 days ago, right? The coincidence is that when I was just at my aunt's house for either Thanksgiving or Christmas, I can't remember which, she was talking about how light bulbs, when she was young, would last forever. A light bulb would last for 5 years, as opposed to now, you put in a light bulb and the light bulb dies within a year or two or something like that. And she's 75, 76 years old or something like that, 74. And this is what she said to me unprovoked, right? I remember the toys that I used to play with as a kid. They were made of metal. When you would get a Tonka truck, they were literally made of metal. They were not plastic. And you could argue that that could be for safety. You could argue that that's for affordability for the manufacturer. Who knows? But I do know the toys that I used to play with versus the toys that I have to buy for my children now, night and day difference in build quality, lasting power, night and day difference. I want to get to this video that inspired this whole talk. John Deere is a company that, for those of you who for some reason don't know, make yard equipment, farming equipment, tractors, trailers, backhoes, whatever you can think of in that realm of equipment, they make it. John Deere, I believe, even makes lawnmowers, weed whackers, all those sorts of things, hedgers, all of that.
I'm a third generation Montana farmer rancher. I raise registered Black Angus. I also sell about 1,000 ton of hay. The operations of a new tractor are really nice. Modern equipment has a lot of sensors, electronic switches. These power shift transmissions are wonderful. But during the busy season, the tractor kept shutting down for no reason. It was weird. It would just randomly shut down. And so I thought maybe it was something in the fuel system. I changed the fuel filter, but it kept doing it. So then I finally called our John Deere mechanic, and he said, really the only way we can figure this out is we got to hook up a computer and download the error codes. And I said, all right, can I come in and borrow it? Oh, no, we don't do that. I said, okay, I'll rent it. How much does it cost to rent it? No, we don't rent it. Well, I had hay.
So you hear that. His tractor is shutting off for no reason, no apparent reason. Who knows what the reason is? It could be a legitimate reason. The first place that my cynical mind went, though, is that it's like a manufactured problem. It's like something that they caused to force you to service your tractor so that you have to come to John Deere, because if it worked forever, you would have no need to communicate with them, to give them any more money. It's the same thing about all of these services that we have going to subscription-based licenses instead of perpetual licenses. I'm an engineer. I have to buy plugins all the time. This week alone, I probably bought 8 plugins. I bought some music gear. And at this point, I really only subscribe to plug-in developers on the music side of things that give you the option for perpetual license. I have Photoshop, Lightroom, Adobe programs, and they don't even allow you to buy an outright license for those programs anymore. You have to pay monthly for Photoshop. I've been paying for about 8-9 months or something like that. It might have been longer. And the only reason that I decided to break down and pay was because I became a photographer. I use Lightroom all the time to edit my photos. I had a version of the program that, let's just say, for lack of better words, did not belong to me. And they, with their software, their piracy detection software, they discovered that. They gave me the grace of saying, okay, we'll we realize that you're using fake software, so we're going to allow you to continue to use it for 7 days. And after that, or was it 10 days? And after those 10 days, you got to pay. And I'm like, damn, I'm like just now getting my feet wet with this photography thing. And I don't want to lose this program because this program is dope. You know, it's worth paying for, so I paid for it. But boy, I promise I would much rather pay the $100, $200, $300 to own the program outright, the way that Photoshop and Lightroom used to do. Now everything's a subscription base where you have to pay a set amount of dollars per month. I don't like that. So John Deere here says, we don't give you the computer to diagnose the problems of your tractor. You got to bring it to us because we don't want you working on it yourself. The farming industry, the agricultural industry has been ransacked. There's a word I want to use, but I can't use it on YouTube. But the farming industry is just, it's been bullied and claimed a long time ago by people much more powerful than me. Farmers don't even have the rights to their own seeds. You can't plant your own seeds. When you grow fruit or vegetables, those vegetables come out of the ground bearing their own seeds so that they can reproduce. That's how God intended it, right? Farmers do not have the right to use their own seeds. You have to use the seeds that belong to companies like Monsanto and all the other big agricultural, you know, it's like all the farmers have been claimed and basically contracted out to where they have to work in the interest of these companies that control all the food in the world, or at least in the United States. And this right here is just another foot on farmers' necks. Not only do they not have control over their own crops or seeds or the genealogy of the seeds that they would like to grow, they don't even have control over fixing and servicing their own farming equipment. Let's continue playing the video.
Ready to bail. And that's a critical time because if you get a little rain, it could wreck the quality of the hay. He says, I can't get to you for a week. They aren't going to give me the tools to be able to fix it myself. I was stuck.
John Deere is costing farmers and ranchers like Walter billions of dollars in lost income. And what John Deere is doing affects you even if you're not a farmer.
It has officially happened. Authorization denied.
A repair shop like mine, we're charging half what Apple would charge.
Almost a whole entire paycheck just to swap out some handlebars.
If I replace a component, it breaks something in the phone.
I just need a new battery, come on.
Why is it so hard?
Yep, they even put fail safes in the way it's on my PlayStation. It's probably on this laptop too. If you open it, it breaks. There's like a seal that they put in the inside of electronics, and it breaks it to basically prove to them or show to them that it's been meddled with. You know, if you open your PlayStation, you have to break a seal to get to the board. And I understand it on both sides. I understand that they don't want you to go in, destroy something, close it back up, and then take it to them and say, your product is faulty. So I get that, right? But with something like an iPhone, it's like these cell phone repair places, they either have to find these tools that you need to open up these phones, and when you open them up, there's fail safes in the way to discourage them from working on an iPhone or even a iMac. Oh, not an iMac. What is it called? MacBook.
To repair the things we own. So this is the tractor.
Yep, this is the culprit. It was just randomly shutting down. First thing we did was change the fuel filters in it, and it didn't really resolve the problem. So I was stymied at that point.
That's the only thing that you basically have the ability to do without the John Deere software.
That's exactly right. Yep. The first couple tractors I learned to drive on didn't have any electric controls. It was all mechanical controls. But, you know, those old tractors were pretty easy to diagnose if there was a problem. and pretty easy to fix those problems.
When a modern John Deere tractor malfunctions, you can't diagnose the problem without John Deere's software. But John Deere won't let farmers or independent mechanics use it. Only an authorized dealership.
And I said, all right, well, send your tech out. Let's get it done.
Yeah.
And he says, well, but we're pretty busy. We might be able to do it a little faster if you brought it into our shop.
And that faster ended up being
A month.
in farming, time is of the essence.
We have windows of opportunity where we can get our crop planted at the right time. Too early, you might damage the crop. Too late, you might damage the crop. And then on top of that, you've got Mother Nature.
Yes, and that's exactly what my point was about the farming industry being something that almost seems like this sort of like safeguarding or this gatekeeping of these sorts of things it's almost malicious. It's detrimental to the field itself. Now, my Rolex, if I have to take that to the dealer, to a authorized repair shop or Rolex themselves, and there's a wait list that's 8-9 months long, who knows? I don't know. I don't own any Rolexes, but I would imagine, considering how it's usually a wait list. Like, I've been in Rolex stores before, and you can't just walk in there a lot of times and just buy a watch, especially when you're talking about Hublots and stuff like that, and you start going up the ladder of like watch brands. But if there's a wait list, this watch not working isn't going to affect my livelihood or even the world. But with farming, if you delay my process of being able to bale this hay, pick these crops, whatever it is, for a month, you could ruin my entire year of harvesting. You could ruin my entire season, rather. And that, I don't understand that. You know, I'm not going to play this whole video. It's pretty long, but I think you get the gist. Where we're heading as a society, where everything is so, it's all bumpered in. It's all packaged pretty, and there is no more control given to the consumer or the average human being. We have to go through these channels to get all of our things done. You know, on one hand, it improves the world. You know, I can't even give you any examples, to be honest. But let me think about it. You know, things being more regulated and more universal have given us things like safer practices in electrical, or more universal pieces that, you know, things fit all of our homes. Imagine being 100 years ago, when things were not as universal as they are now. You would go into someone's house and their plugs in their wall would be slightly different than yours, or the light bulb fixture would be a little different than yours. So it would like ruin everything, because I wouldn't be able to take my light bulb to your house. Or each brand would make fixtures and bulbs that were unique to them only. But now you could buy a light bulb from any company. It fits into any light bulb socket for the most part. You know, in America, all the plugs are pretty much the same thing. Your stove, it has a different type of plug, but most other appliances have the same 2 or 3 prong plug that's universal from the East Coast to the West Coast. Those are good examples. But when you do things like this, where you have to go to the source to get your things taken care of, it holds you up. It bottlenecks us all as a people. I just saw a video a minute ago, you know, during me doing this episode, where it's cold as shit right now. It's wintertime, and there's a bunch of drivers who drive Teslas. And because it's so cold, it affected the charging stations. So now there's a charging station. I don't remember what place this was. I lost the video. It was in my algorithm somewhere. But everybody was stranded at this charging station because they could not charge their vehicles. So you had people staying there overnight, Had people getting their cars towed to the Tesla facility where Tesla could charge it for them. I don't know where we're going as a society, but that sounds like we are giving too much power to them, and we have less control over the things that we spend all this money to have. And I don't like that shit. Appreciate you for tapping in, man. Hit the like and the subscribe. Hit the share. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about this. If you have any takes on this that maybe I missed, or if you disagree with me, feel free to voice your opinions. I appreciate you for tapping in, man. Let's keep going. Holla at me.